I was 20 years old when I called in Napalm on my own position in Vietnam. 55 years later, I still wake up some mornings with the taste of smoke in my mouth and the sound of that radio crackling in my ears. People ask me how I knew what to do in that moment, how I found the courage to make that call. The truth is, I didn't know anything. I was just a scared kid from East LA who happened to be holding the radio when everything went to hell. But let me take you back to Firebase Charlie, November 1968. Picture a hilltop about 15 miles south of the DMZ. Nothing but jungle stretching in every direction like a green ocean. We'd been up there for 3 weeks, 4 of us manning an observation post that was supposed to spot enemy movement and call in coordinates. The Army called it a strategic position. We called it the middle of nowhere. The morning it all started, I was cleaning my radio equipment in our makeshift bunker, surrounded by sandbags and the smell of sea rations. Through the opening, I could see Jimmy O'Sullivan from Boston sprawled in the morning sun, writing another letter home to his girl. Doc Nguyen sat cross-legged nearby, methodically checking his medical supplies for the 3rd time that week. Sergeant Bulldog Thompson was doing what he always did at 0800, scanning the tree line with his binoculars, jaw working a piece of gum like his life depended on it. "Radio," Bulldog called, without lowering his field glasses. "Check in with base. Something feels off today." I keyed the handset. "Falcon Base, this is Outpost Charlie. Morning report. Over." The response crackled back immediately. "Charlie, this is Falcon Base. All quiet on your end?" "Affirmative, Falcon Base. No movement observed since—" "Hold on." Bulldog's voice cut through the routine. He adjusted his binoculars, squinting hard at something in the distance. "Radio, tell them we've got possible movement. Grid reference 315628. Can't confirm numbers yet." I relayed the information while watching Bulldog's face tighten with concentration. After 4 months in country, I'd learned to read that expression. It meant trouble was coming our way, and we were about to find out just how much. "What have you got, Bulldog?" Jimmy asked, setting down his pencil and crawling over to our position. "Not sure yet. Could be nothing, could be." Bulldog handed me the binoculars. "Take a look at that ridgeline, about 2 clicks northwest. Tell me what you see." I adjusted the focus and scanned the area he indicated. At first, just green jungle canopy swaying in the morning breeze. Then I caught it, a flash of movement that didn't belong. "There's something there. Looks like maybe 3, 4 figures moving through the trees." "That's what I thought." Bulldog took the binoculars back. "Doc, get over here." Doc Nguyen looked up from organizing his medical kit. At 19, he was the youngest of us, but his hands were steadier than a surgeon's when the shooting started. "What's the situation, Sarge?" "Possible contact. Jimmy, check your ammo count. Radio, get back on with base and tell them we need a sitrep on any friendly units in our area." Jimmy's usual grin faded as he moved to his machine gun position. "How many we talking about, Sarge?" "Don't know yet. Could be a patrol, could be scouts for something bigger." Bulldog kept his eyes on the tree line. "Radio?" I was already keying the handset. "Falcon Base, this is Charlie. Request confirmation of any friendly units operating in grid squares 314 through 320. Over." "Charlie, that's a negative. No friendlies in your sector. What's your status?" "Possible enemy movement observed. Maintaining watch." Doc moved to his aid station, a small depression we'd dug behind the main bunker. "Sarge, if this is what I think it is—" "Yeah, I know." Bulldog's voice carried that calm authority that had kept us alive this long. He was from some small town in Tennessee, been in country for 18 months, and had a way of making you believe everything would work out, even when the odds said otherwise. "Tommy, you scared?" I looked up from the radio. "Terrified." "Good. Scared keeps you alive. Jimmy, You got enough belt for that 60? 400 rounds, Sarge, plus my rifle ammo. Doc? Medical supplies are good. Plenty of bandages, morphine, the works. Bulldog nodded, still scanning with his binoculars. Here's what we know. We're on a hilltop with good fields of fire in 3 directions. We've got decent cover, good radio contact with base, and 4 months of working together as a team. Whatever's out there, we can handle it. But even as he said it, I caught something in his voice, a tightness that hadn't been there before. Through my own binoculars, I could see more movement now. Not just 3 or 4 figures, but what looked like an entire line of them moving through the jungle below us. Sarge, I said quietly, I think we might have a problem. Bulldog took one more long look through his field glasses, then lowered them slowly. Radio, get back on with base. Tell them we've got confirmed enemy movement, at least squad strength, possibly more. Request immediate backup and air support on standby. Jimmy's nervous laugh echoed across our position. Just like back in Southie. You see trouble coming. You call your big brothers. Except our big brothers are 20 miles away, Doc said softly. Then we better make sure they know where to find us, Bulldog replied, his Tennessee drawl getting thicker the way it always did when things got serious. Radio, make that call. And make it good. I keyed the handset, my thumb suddenly slick with sweat. Falcon Base, this is Outpost Charlie. We have confirmed enemy contact, estimated squad strength or larger. Request immediate assistance, over. The pause before the response lasted forever. Charlie, this is Falcon Base. Say again your situation, over. Before I could respond, the first shot cracked across the hilltop. The bullet whined past my head and slammed into the sandbags behind me, spraying dirt everywhere. Contact! Contact! Bulldog shouted, dropping behind cover. Radio, get down! I dove into the bunker as more shots erupted from the tree line. Jimmy's machine gun opened up with its distinctive hammering sound, sending tracers streaking into the jungle below. The enemy fire intensified immediately. Not just rifle shots now, but the deeper bark of AK-47s and the distinctive pop-pop-pop of RPGs being launched. Falcon Base, this is Charlie! I screamed into the handset over the gunfire. We are taking heavy fire. Estimate company strength or larger. We need immediate support. Charlie, we're scrambling a reaction force. ETA 45 minutes. Can you hold? 45 minutes. An explosion rocked our position as an RPG detonated against the front slope of our hill. Jimmy kept his machine gun chattering, sweeping back and forth across the enemy positions. They're everywhere, Doc yelled from his aid station. I count muzzle flashes from at least 3 different directions. Bulldog low-crawled to my position, keeping his head down as bullets snapped overhead. Radio, tell base we're surrounded. This isn't a patrol. This is a full assault. Another RPG explosion, closer this time. I could taste cordite and dirt in the air. Falcon Base, we are surrounded by estimated company strength enemy force. Request immediate air support. Charlie, understand you're surrounded. Air support is being scrambled. Hold your position. Hold our position? Jimmy's voice cracked with strain as he changed ammunition belts. Where the hell are we gonna go? Doc suddenly cried out. I turned to see him clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Doc's hit, I shouted. How bad? Bulldog called back. Through and through, Doc replied through gritted teeth, already working on his own wound with one hand. I'm still good. The enemy fire was coming from everywhere now, a coordinated assault from multiple directions. Every time Jimmy tried to suppress one position, fire would erupt from another. We were caught in a deadly crossfire with nowhere to run. Sarge! Jimmy yelled. I'm down to my last belt. Make it count. Bulldog returned fire with his rifle, picking his shots carefully. Radio, what's the ETA on that reaction force? I keyed the handset again. Falcon Base, what's the ETA on our backup? Charlie, reaction force is 30 minutes out. Air support, 20 minutes. Can you hold? I looked around our position. Doc was wounded but still fighting. Jimmy was almost out of ammunition. Bulldog was doing his best with single shots against what sounded like 100 weapons firing at us. The enemy was getting closer. I could hear voices shouting in Vietnamese, coordinating their assault. Bulldog, I said, my voice barely steady. I don't think 30 minutes is gonna cut it. He looked at me with those steady eyes that had seen too much war. Then we better figure out another way, hadn't we, Radio? The truth was settling over all of us like a cold fog. We weren't getting out of this one. Not all of us. Maybe not any of us. The immediate aftermath of that realization hit each of us differently. Jimmy went quiet for the first time since I'd known him, methodically checking his remaining ammunition with the focused intensity of someone doing math that might save his life. Doc pressed himself against the bunker wall, working on his shoulder wound with steady hands despite the blood loss, his face pale but determined. Bulldog took charge the way he always did, but I could see something new in his expression. Not fear, exactly, but the kind of cold calculation that comes when a leader realizes he's running out of options. "Okay, listen up," he said, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the sporadic gunfire. "We're gonna do this smart. Radio, get back on with base and tell them we need exact numbers on that enemy force. If intelligence has been tracking movement in this sector, I want to know about it." I keyed the handset. "Falcon Base, this is Charlie. Request intelligence update on enemy strength in our area. We're taking coordinated fire from multiple positions. Charlie, stand by for intelligence update." While we waited, Doc managed to get his shoulder bandaged well enough to use his rifle. "Sarge, I'm seeing movement on the east slope. They're trying to flank us." "Jimmy, can you get eyes on that position?" Jimmy adjusted his machine gun, wincing as another burst of enemy fire kicked up dirt near his position. "Yeah, I see them. Looks like maybe 8, 10 guys working their way up through those rocks." "Take them!" Jimmy's machine gun erupted again, sending a long burst into the enemy position. I heard screams and saw several figures drop, but more kept coming. "Falcon Base, this is Charlie. Where's that intelligence update?" "Charlie, we show estimated NVA company strength, approximately 120 personnel, moving through your sector over the past 48 hours. You're facing organized assault by regular forces. 120 enemy soldiers. The 4 of us." "Jesus," Jimmy breathed. "We're not getting out of this, are we?" Bulldog's jaw tightened. "Nobody's dying on my watch if I can help it." "Radio, what kind of air support are they sending?" I relayed the question and waited for the response. "Charlie, we have fast movers inbound. ETA 15 minutes. What kind of strike do you need?" "Tell them we need close air support. Danger close, if necessary," Bulldog ordered. "Falcon Base, request close air support. Prepared for danger close engagement." "Charlie, understand danger close. What's your minimum safe distance?" I looked at Bulldog. In training, minimum safe distance for conventional airstrikes was supposed to be at least 200 meters. Looking at the enemy positions closing in around us, some were less than 50 meters away. "Sarge, they want to know minimum safe distance." Bulldog studied the terrain around us, calculating angles and distances with the kind of tactical awareness that had kept him alive through 2 tours. "Radio, tell them we'll take whatever they can give us." At this point, danger close is better than being overrun. But even as I relayed the message, we all understood what he wasn't saying. The enemy was so close now that any effective airstrike would put us in almost as much danger as them. We were trapped between certain death from the ground assault and probable death from our own air support. Doc looked up from reloading his rifle. "My grandmother used to say that when you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, you pick the one that gives you a fighting chance." Your grandmother ever call in airstrikes on her own position? Jimmy asked, his Boston accent thick with nervous tension. No, but she survived the Japanese occupation of Saigon. She knew something about impossible choices. The radio crackled again, cutting through our grim calculations. Charlie, this is Falcon Base. We have additional air assets available. Fast movers are carrying conventional ordnance, but we also have a flight of F-4s armed with napalm. Over. Napalm. The word hung in the air like a curse. We all knew what that meant. Jellied gasoline that stuck to everything it touched, burning at over 1,000 degrees. It was devastatingly effective against enemy positions, but the blast radius and heat signature were massive. Radio, Bulldog said quietly. Ask them what the danger close distance is for napalm. I keyed the handset with hands that were starting to shake. Falcon Base, what's the minimum safe distance for napalm delivery? Charlie, napalm danger close is 400 meters minimum. Recommend you mark your position and move to safe distance before delivery. 400 meters. I looked around our hilltop position, then at the enemy forces that had us completely surrounded within 100 meters on all sides. There was nowhere to go. Jimmy's machine gun had gone quiet. Sarge, I'm down to maybe 50 rounds, he called out, his voice tight with the kind of control that comes right before panic. Doc pressed himself against the bunker wall as another burst of AK fire chewed up the sandbags above his head. They're getting closer on the east side. I can hear them talking. Bulldog moved to the edge of our perimeter and peered through his binoculars. What he saw made his face go stone cold. They're massing for a final assault. I count at least 30 moving up the south slope. The radio squawked again. Charlie, this is Falcon Base. What's your decision on air support? We need to know now. I looked at Bulldog, waiting for orders that I already knew would change everything. His Tennessee drawl was barely above a whisper when he spoke. Radio, ask them if the pilot can put napalm right on top of us. Ask them if anyone's ever survived a napalm strike at zero distance. Sarge, I can't. Ask them. I keyed the handset, my voice cracking. Falcon Base, this is Charlie. If we call napalm on our own coordinates, what are our chances of survival? The silence on the radio lasted forever. When the response came, it was from a different voice, older, more authoritative. Charlie, this is Colonel Hayes, forward air controller. Son, napalm at danger close distances has never been attempted with friendly forces in the target area. The survival rate would be minimal. How minimal? Bulldog called out. I relayed the question. Charlie, I have to be honest with you. The chances of surviving a napalm strike on your own position are less than 5%. But if you're about to be overrun, the sound of enemy voices was getting closer now, shouting coordinates to each other in Vietnamese. Jimmy suddenly opened up with his remaining ammunition, spraying the tree line in desperation. They're coming, Doc yelled. I can see them moving through the brush. Bulldog grabbed the radio handset from my trembling fingers. Colonel Hayes, this is Sergeant Thompson at Outpost Charlie. We are about to be overrun by superior enemy forces. We have wounded and are low on ammunition. Request immediate napalm strike on our coordinates. We understand the risks. Sergeant, are you absolutely certain? Once I give this order, sir, we're dead either way. At least this gives us a chance. The colonel's voice came back steady but heavy with the weight of what he was about to authorize. Sergeant Thompson, I need you to understand what you're asking. Napalm burns everything within a 300-meter radius. The heat alone can kill at 200 meters. If you're calling this in, you need to get as low as possible and stay there. Understood, sir. Give me your exact coordinates for confirmation. Bulldog looked at me. Radio, give him our grid. I pulled out my map with shaking hands. Grid reference 314-627. Elevation 400 meters. Charlie, confirm grid 314-6227. That's affirmative, sir. Another burst of enemy fire raked across our position. Jimmy's machine gun answered with short, controlled bursts. He was conserving his last rounds. Doc had his rifle up, taking careful shots at movement in the tree line. "Sarge!" Jimmy called out. "There may be 50 meters out on the south side." Colonel Hayes's voice crackled through the radio again. "Charlie, I have F-4 Phantoms inbound. Call sign Hammer Flight. ETA 3 minutes. I need you to mark your position with smoke if you have it." "We're out of smoke grenades," Bulldog replied. "Then I need you to give me a terrain reference. What's the most distinctive feature of your position?" I keyed the handset. "Sir, we're on the highest point of the ridgeline, approximately 50 meters across. We have a large dead tree on the northeast corner of our perimeter." "Copy that, Charlie. Dead tree, northeast corner, highest point on the ridge." The sound of automatic weapons fire was intensifying from all directions now. The enemy was closing in for their final assault, and they knew it. I could hear officers shouting orders in Vietnamese, coordinating the attack. Doc suddenly cried out. A bullet had grazed his helmet, spinning it sideways on his head. "That was close." "How close are they now?" Bulldog asked. Jimmy peered over his position. 30 meters, maybe less. I can see individual faces. "Colonel Hayes," Bulldog spoke into the radio, "we need that strike now. They're almost on top of us." "Charlie, Hammer Flight is 90 seconds out. When I give you the word, I need everyone in your deepest cover. Do not expose any part of your body above ground level. The heat signature alone can kill you." I looked around our position. The deepest cover we had was the small bunker I'd been using for the radio equipment, maybe 4 feet deep with sandbags piled around the edges. It might protect one person, maybe 2 if they squeezed together. "Sarge," I said quietly, "there's not enough room in the bunker for all of us." Bulldog's eyes met mine, and I saw in them the kind of decision that leaders make when there are no good choices left. "Yes, there is, radio." "We'll make room." Doc looked up from his firing position, blood trickling down his face from the helmet hit. "Sarge, are we really doing this?" "Yeah, Doc, we really are." Jimmy's nervous laugh came out as more of a sob. "My mother's gonna kill me if I survive this, just to tell her I called napalm on myself." "Then we better make sure you get the chance to have that conversation," Bulldog said. The radio crackled one final time. "Charlie, this is Hammer Lead. I have eyes on your position. 30 seconds to impact. Get down now." "Move! Everyone in the bunker now!" Bulldog shouted. We scrambled toward the small radio bunker, a space barely big enough for 2 people that would now have to protect all 4 of us. Jimmy reached it first, diving head first into the depression. Doc tumbled in after him, clutching his wounded shoulder. I followed, the radio handset still gripped in my fist. Bulldog came last, throwing himself on top of us just as the sound of jet engines screamed overhead. The F-4 Phantoms were making their approach run, and somewhere above us, a pilot was about to drop liquid fire on American soldiers. "Keep your heads down!" Bulldog yelled. "Whatever happens, don't look up." We pressed ourselves into the bottom of that bunker like we were trying to become part of the earth itself. Jimmy was hyperventilating, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Doc had gone completely silent, his medic training taking over as he prepared himself for whatever was coming. I still had the radio handset pressed against my ear, listening to the pilot's final approach calls. 30 seconds! The enemy fire around us was reaching a crescendo. I could hear Vietnamese voices shouting orders, maybe 20 meters away now. They knew something was happening. The sound of approaching aircraft had changed the tempo of their assault. 20 seconds! Bulldog pressed his helmet down harder against the back of my head. "Radio, I want you to know, if we don't make it out of this, you did everything right. You all did. Shut up, Sarge, Jimmy gasped. We're gonna make it. We have to make it. 10 seconds! The roar of the F-4's engines was directly overhead now, so loud it drowned out everything else. In that moment, pressed against the dirt with 3 other scared kids, I thought about my mother back in East LA, probably making breakfast and listening to the radio. I thought about the letter I'd never finished writing to my girlfriend Maria. I thought about all the things I'd never get to do if the mathematics of war went against us. 5 seconds! Heads down! Doc grabbed my hand. Jimmy was praying in rapid-fire Spanish. Bulldog's voice cut through the engine noise one last time. Whatever happens, we stay together. Then the world exploded. The napalm canisters hit the hillside with a sound like thunder, but that was nothing compared to what came next. The jellied gasoline erupted in a fireball that turned day into hell. Even with my eyes squeezed shut and my face pressed into the dirt, I could see the orange glow through my eyelids. The heat hit us like opening an oven door, sucking the air from our lungs. The temperature around us spiked to over 800 degrees in seconds. My exposed skin felt like it was being held against a hot stove. The metal on my rifle became too hot to touch. Above us, the sandbags were catching fire, and I could smell burning canvas and melting plastic. But we were alive. Somehow, impossibly, we were still breathing. The napalm burned for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When the heat finally began to subside, the hillside around us had been transformed into a moonscape of charred earth and twisted metal. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the explosion itself. No enemy gunfire, no voices shouting in Vietnamese, no sound at all except the crackling of fires burning in the jungle around us and the distant drone of the F-4s circling overhead. "Is everyone alive?" Bulldog's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I think so," Jimmy croaked. "Jesus, I think so." Doc stirred beneath me, checking his limbs methodically. "I'm here. Burns on my hands, but I'm here." I tried to speak, but could only manage a cough. The superheated air had seared my throat raw. Finally, I managed to get words out. "Radio's still working." I held up the handset, which had somehow survived the inferno. Slowly, carefully, we began to untangle ourselves from the bunker. The sandbags around us were charred black, some still smoldering. The metal equipment was too hot to touch directly. But we were alive, and that seemed like a miracle. Bulldog was the first to raise his head above the rim of our shelter. What he saw made him freeze completely. "Mother of God," he breathed. I crawled up beside him and looked out at what had been our battlefield just minutes before. The hillside was completely black, scorched down to bare earth. Trees that had provided cover for the enemy assault were now twisted skeletons of charcoal. The rocks where we'd seen enemy soldiers moving were glowing with residual heat, and scattered across the entire slope were the remains of the NVA company that had been about to overrun us. The napalm had caught them in the open during their final assault, exactly as Colonel Hayes had predicted. They'd had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "Count off," Bulldog ordered, his voice still rough from the heat and smoke. "Jimmy's here," came the reply from behind me. "Doc's alive," Doc added, though I could hear the strain in his voice. "Radio present and accounted for," I managed. Colonel Hayes's voice crackled through the handset. "Charlie, this is Falcon Base. Report your status." I keyed the microphone with shaking hands. "Falcon Base, this is Charlie. 4 souls alive and accounted for. Enemy force appears to be neutralized." "Charlie, say again. You survived?" "Affirmative, sir. We're all here." There was a long pause before the colonel's voice came back, and I could hear something like amazement in it. "Charlie, that's not supposed to be possible." "Stand by for medevac and recovery team. Jimmy started laughing then, not the nervous, forced humor he'd used throughout the assault, but real laughter born of the kind of relief that comes when you realize you're not dead, when you absolutely should be. "We did it," he said, still laughing. "We actually did it. We called napalm on ourselves and lived to tell about it." Doc was examining his burned hands with professional detachment. "The bunker saved us. That and maybe 6 inches of earth between us and 800 degrees. Bulldog looked around at the devastation surrounding our tiny pocket of survival. "Radio, you know what this means?" "What's that, Sarge?" "You're never going to be able to tell this story without people thinking you're lying." And he was right. As the immediate shock wore off, the reality of what we'd just experienced began to settle in. We sat in that scorched bunker, 4 young men who had just survived something that military manuals said was impossible, and tried to process what it meant. "My ears are ringing," Jimmy said, touching the side of his head gingerly. "Everything sounds like it's coming from underwater." Doc nodded, still examining his burns. "That's normal. The pressure wave from the explosion. It'll pass in a few hours." He looked up at the rest of us. "We're all going to need medical attention. 2nd-degree burns at minimum. Possible internal injuries from the heat exposure. But we're alive," Bulldog said, and there was something almost reverent in his voice. "Against all odds, we're sitting here talking about it." I keyed the radio again. "Falcon Base, this is Charlie. We're going to need medical evacuation. Multiple personnel with burn injuries. Charlie, medevac is already inbound. ETA 15 minutes. Can you move to a landing zone?" I looked around at the charred landscape. "Sir, the entire hilltop is now a landing zone. There's nothing left standing." "Copy that, Charlie. Hammer Flight reports complete neutralization of enemy forces in your sector. You can expect friendly recovery teams within the hour." As we waited for the helicopters, something strange began to happen. The adrenaline that had carried us through the assault and the napalm strike started to fade, and in its place came an odd mixture of emotions I'd never experienced before. Jimmy was the first to voice it. "Sarge, I feel guilty." "Is that crazy? We just lived through something impossible, and I feel guilty about it." Doc looked up from bandaging his burned hands with supplies from his medical kit. "It's not crazy. It's survivor's guilt. It's normal when you make it through something that others didn't. Those NVA soldiers," Jimmy continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "they were just doing their job, same as us. They had families, people who loved them. And now they're dead," Bulldog finished. "Yeah, they're dead. And we're not. That's war, Jimmy. That's what it does. It puts people in impossible situations, and somebody doesn't come home." I found myself thinking about the enemy commander who had coordinated that assault. He'd done everything right from a tactical standpoint. Surrounded us, cut off our escape routes, massed his forces for a final overwhelming attack. By all military logic, his plan should have worked. We should have been overrun. "The thing is," I said slowly, "they almost had us. If that napalm had been delivered 30 seconds later—" "But it wasn't," Doc interrupted. "Timing, luck, training, maybe divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. We're here, and they're not." The sound of helicopter rotors began to echo across the valley below us. Our rescue was coming, but I realized that in some ways we'd never really leave this hilltop. The 4 of us would carry this moment for the rest of our lives. "Radio," Bulldog said. "When they debrief us back at base, when they ask you to write the after-action report, make sure you tell them exactly what happened here, every detail. Because someday, some other scared kid with a radio might need to know that impossible decisions sometimes work out. You think anyone will believe it? Doesn't matter if they believe it. What matters is that it's true." The helicopters were getting closer now, and I could see dust being kicked up by their rotor wash in the distance. Soon we'd be evacuated, treated for our injuries, and eventually sent home. But the weight of that radio call would follow me forever. The medevac helicopter touched down in a whirlwind of ash and debris, the pilot's face visible through the cockpit window, staring in disbelief at the moonscape we'd created. 2 medics jumped out, running toward us with stretchers and medical bags. "Which one of you called in the napalm strike?" the first medic shouted over the rotor noise. I raised my hand weakly. "That would be me." He stopped dead in his tracks, looking from me to the charred devastation around us, then back to me. "Son, you're either the luckiest man alive or the craziest. Maybe both." As they loaded us onto stretchers, I caught glimpses of the recovery team that had arrived with the medevac, soldiers with body bags and cameras, documenting what would become one of the most studied incidents in military history. They moved through the scorched battlefield with the quiet efficiency of men who had seen death before, but even they seemed shaken by the scope of destruction. Jimmy was loaded onto the stretcher next to mine, his face pale but alert. "Radio," he said as they strapped him in. "When we get back to the world, nobody's gonna believe this story." That's what Bulldog said. Bulldog's right, but that's okay. We'll know what happened here. Doc was arguing with the medics about his ability to walk. "I'm a medic myself. These are second-degree burns, not life-threatening. I can assist with the others." "Sir, you're a patient now," one of the medics replied firmly. "Let us do our job." Bulldog was the last to be loaded, and as they carried his stretcher past mine, he reached out and grabbed my arm. "Radio, I want you to remember something. What you did today, making that call, that took more courage than anything I've ever seen in 2 tours of duty. Don't let anyone tell you different." The helicopter lifted off, carrying us away from Firebase Charlie and the hilltop that had nearly become our grave. Through the small window, I watched the blackened landscape shrink below us, but the weight of what had happened there seemed to grow heavier the farther we got from it. During the flight to the field hospital, one of the medics kept asking questions about our exposure to the napalm. "The heat signature at your distance should have killed you instantly," he said, checking my pulse and blood pressure. "The fact that you're conscious and talking is unprecedented." "How unprecedented?" I asked. "Like, they're going to want to study you unprecedented. The medical corps has never had survivors from a point-blank napalm strike. You 4 are going to be in textbooks." At the field hospital, they separated us for individual treatment and debriefing. I found myself in a sterile white tent, being examined by doctors who looked at me like I was some kind of scientific curiosity. They treated my burns, checked my lung function, and took blood samples for tests I didn't understand. But the hardest part came when the intelligence officers arrived for debriefing. A colonel I'd never seen before sat across from me with a tape recorder and a stack of forms. "Specialist Martinez," he began, "I need you to walk me through exactly what happened on that hilltop. Start with the first enemy contact, and don't leave out any details." So I told him everything. The surrounding enemy force, the impossible mathematics of our situation, Bulldog's decision to authorize the strike, my call to Colonel Hayes, and those terrifying minutes in the bunker while jellied fire rained down around us. When I finished, the colonel sat back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "Specialist, do you understand that what you've described is tactically impossible? No unit has ever called for and survived a napalm strike on their own position." "Yes, sir. But it happened." "Yes," he said quietly. "It did." 3 days later, they brought the 4 of us together in a hospital conference room for what they called a collective debriefing. We sat around a metal table, our burns bandaged and our hands still shaking slightly from the aftermath, while a panel of officers recorded our every word. The thing you have to understand, Colonel Patterson, the head investigator, said as he reviewed our individual statements, is that this incident challenges everything we know about close air support protocols. The survival rate you four achieved shouldn't exist. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Are we in trouble, sir, for calling in the strike? Trouble? The colonel looked genuinely surprised. Son, you're heroes. What Sergeant Thompson authorized and what Specialist Martinez executed saved not only your lives, but potentially prevented that NVA company from moving on to attack other American positions. Doc spoke up, his voice still hoarse from smoke inhalation. Sir, what about the enemy casualties? How many? 118 confirmed KIA. The entire company was eliminated. The colonel's tone grew somber. That Napalm strike was one of the most effective tactical air support missions of the war. But it should have killed you all in the process. Bulldog, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Sir, what happens now? To us, I mean. You're all going home, Patterson replied. Medical discharge for combat injuries. You've done your part. He paused, looking at each of us in turn. But I need to ask you something. The brass wants to know if you'd be willing to speak about this experience. Training purposes. Help other units understand the tactical possibilities. The room fell silent. I could see the conflict in everyone's faces. The desire to help other soldiers weighed against the weight of reliving that day over and over again. What would that involve? I asked. Lectures at officer training schools, maybe some written materials for tactical manuals. The military wants to study what happened here, understand how you survived, maybe develop new protocols for extreme situations. Jimmy shook his head slowly. I don't think I can do that, sir. Talk about it like it was just tactics. Those enemy soldiers, they died screaming. I understand, the colonel said gently. This is voluntary. No pressure. Doc looked around the table at the rest of us. Maybe we should think about it. If our experience can help save other American lives? But at what cost? Bulldog interrupted, his Tennessee drawl thick with emotion. Every time we tell this story, we're also talking about the 118 men who died. They were somebody's sons, too. The weight of that truth settled over us like a heavy blanket. We'd survived something impossible, but survival came with its own burden. We'd have to carry the memory of that day, both the miracle of our survival and the horror of what it cost, for the rest of our lives. Take your time deciding, Colonel Patterson said, gathering his papers. For now, focus on healing. You've earned it. After the officers left, the four of us sat in that hospital room, not saying much. The silence was comfortable in a way that only people who've shared something profound can understand. Finally, Jimmy spoke. When I get home to Boston, my neighborhood's gonna want to throw me a parade. Local hero survives impossible odds. But how do you celebrate something like this? You don't celebrate it, Bulldog said quietly. You carry it. You honor it. You make sure it means something. And in that moment, I understood that our real challenge wasn't surviving the napalm strike. It was learning how to live with what we'd survived. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hospital ward was quiet except for the occasional groan from wounded soldiers and the soft footsteps of night shift nurses. I kept replaying that radio call in my head, hearing Colonel Hayes's voice asking for confirmation of coordinates, feeling the weight of the handset in my trembling hands. Around 0300, I heard movement from the bed next to mine. Jimmy was sitting up, staring out the window at the darkness beyond. Can't sleep either? I whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see that hillside burning, he replied softly. Not the enemy soldiers, just the fire. All that orange and black, like the whole world was ending. Yeah, I know what you mean. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two young men processing something that would define the rest of our lives. Finally, Jimmy spoke again. "Radio, do you think we made the right call? I mean, tactically, sure, it worked. But morally—" Before I could answer, Bulldog's voice came from across the ward. "There was no right call, Jimmy. There was only the call we made. And we're alive because of it." Doc's voice joined the conversation from his bed near the window. "My grandfather fought in World War II. He used to tell me that war doesn't give you good choices and bad choices. It gives you impossible choices, and you live with the consequences either way." "But how do you live with it?" Jimmy asked, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. "How do you go home and pretend to be normal after something like this?" Bulldog sat up in his bed, wincing from his burns. "You don't pretend to be normal. You accept that you're different now. That what happened on that hilltop changed you. And that's okay. Maybe it's supposed to change you." Over the next hour, we talked about everything and nothing. Jimmy told us about his girl back in Boston, how he planned to marry her as soon as he got home. Doc talked about medical school, his dream of becoming a doctor and helping people heal instead of watching them die. Bulldog, surprisingly, admitted he was thinking about staying in the Army, maybe becoming an instructor. "What about you, Radio?" Doc asked. "What are you going to do when you get back to the world?" I'd been thinking about that question for days. I don't know. Before all this, I thought I might become a teacher. Now, I feel like I've got something to say, but I'm not sure what it is yet. "You've got time to figure it out," Bulldog said. "We all do." As dawn began to break through the hospital windows, painting the ward in soft golden light, I realized something important. The four of us would probably never see each other again after we left this place. We'd go back to our separate lives, our separate worlds, carrying our shared experience like a secret burden. But we'd always be connected by what happened on that hilltop. In the most intense moment of our lives, when everything depended on split-second decisions and impossible courage, we'd stood together. That bond couldn't be broken by distance or time. "You know what?" Jimmy said, as the morning light grew stronger. "Maybe the Colonel's right. Maybe we should tell this story. Not for the glory or the recognition, but so other guys in impossible situations know they can survive them." "Maybe," I replied. "But if we do tell it, we tell it all. The survival and the cost. The miracle and the horror. People need to understand both." Doc nodded slowly. "The whole truth. Nothing more, nothing less." "The whole truth," Bulldog agreed. And that's how we made our second impossible decision. To carry the weight of that day forward. To honor both the living and the dead. By making sure the story meant something more than just military tactics.